this technology is very new, and it's something that, no technology can get these answers 100% correct.
For centuries, the Bible has been read, studied, and debated by millions of people. But recently, scientists decided to bring artificial intelligence into the process. As the AI processed the ancient words, its conclusions shocked the researchers. Some results were so disturbing that the team shut the system down. So what exactly did AI find that threw them off balance? Join us, let's find out. AI unlocks the Bible. For thousands of years, the Bible has been one of the most read books in history. People from many cultures have studied it in classrooms, in places of worship, and in quiet moments at home. Until recently, only human scholars could comb through the ancient texts, looking for patterns, meaning, and clues about how these writings came to be. But in the last decade, something new has changed the way researchers approach these old pages. Modern artificial intelligence, tools that can learn patterns in language, is now helping scientists study the Bible in ways that were almost impossible before. This new approach does not replace human study, but it opens doors to discoveries about language, authorship, and meaning that experts could only guess at before. The field that explores AI and Bible study is still young, but it is growing fast. A big academic review of the research shows that AI has already solved many different problems in the analysis of biblical texts. Scientists use machine learning, neural networks, and deep learning to make sense of patterns in language and structure. Their tools help with things like translating texts, finding who likely wrote a text, and marking the role of each word in a sentence. They can also help machines group texts into categories, or even help interpret what the text might mean at a basic level. All of these tasks were difficult and slow when done by hand, but AI speeds up the work and makes patterns easier to spot. One of the most common uses of AI in Bible research is authorship identification. Ancient texts usually do not say clearly who wrote them, and humans have debated this for centuries. Questions like, did Moses write the first 5 books? Or, were different parts of the Old Testament written by different people? Have filled the pages of scholarly journals. Today, scientists train AI models to look at sentence structure, word frequency, and patterns in common words to separate one author's style from another. These models can detect patterns that are too subtle for human eyes alone. In another line of research, scientists are using AI to uncover hidden language patterns that may help explain how sections of the Bible were composed. A team made up of archaeologists, biblical scholars, physicists, and computer scientists worked together to compare language in different parts of the first 5 books. With the help of a custom statistical model, they found patterns showing that some books are more similar to each other than to others. These discoveries help scholars test long-standing theories about how the Bible formed over time. AI tools can also help in machine translation, a task that goes beyond popular language apps. The Bible was originally written in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and translating these texts accurately is a major challenge. AI models trained on large parallel corpora, texts translated side by side, learn to create digital representations of words and phrases. AI can show where 2 translations differ, not just in words but in meaning and tone. This can help translators highlight ancient nuances that may have been lost in more traditional approaches. Another important step in AI research is semantic annotation. This is the process of marking text with tags that explain what each part of the text does. For example, computers can tag nouns, verbs, and grammatical markers, but they can also tag ideas like law, prophecy, or promise. With AI, researchers can automate this tagging on a much larger scale than humans alone. This huge increase in tagged data allows scholars to search for theological themes across the Bible, track how certain ideas shift over time, and see how specific words gain new meaning in different contexts. Clustering and categorization are other areas where AI shines. These methods take many texts and group them based on similarity. For instance, AI can group biblical texts written in similar language styles, despite coming from very different historical periods. This allows scientists to visualize relationships between texts and even discover unexpected connections. Instead of guessing which parts of the Bible belong together, AI highlights similarities based on language use and structure. giving scholars a new way to explore ancient writing traditions. Despite all the excitement, people in the field know that AI is not perfect. While machine learning tools are very powerful, they do not truly understand meaning in the way humans do. They work by calculating patterns and similarities, not by reasoning about culture, history, or theology. This means that some tasks are still very difficult for AI. These limitations are clear in reviews of the field, which point out that tools for interpretation are much less developed than tools for translation or tagging. There is still a long way to go before machines can help in areas that require deep, contextual, or symbolic reasoning. Another challenge comes from the nature of the biblical texts themselves. The Bible is a collection of many genres all woven together in complex ways. Classic AI methods work best when patterns are clear and contexts are stable, but biblical texts contain poetry, metaphor, repetition, and symbolic language that can confuse statistical models. To deal with this, scientists combine AI with careful human scholarship. They use AI to highlight patterns and help generate hypotheses, and then human experts test and interpret those results. A good example of the impact of AI research is the study of ancient manuscripts related to the Bible, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. These texts are among the oldest known copies of parts of the Hebrew Bible, and studying them can shape our understanding of how the Bible was transmitted. Scientists developed an AI model called Enoch to analyze handwriting patterns on scroll fragments. By training the model on manuscripts with known radiocarbon dates and handwriting samples, they could estimate the age of undated pieces. In many cases, the AI's results matched traditional expert assessments, and in some instances it even suggested older dates than previously believed. These studies do not replace human judgment, but they provide a powerful new tool for exploring history. As more AI tools enter biblical research, scholars are discovering new ways to approach ancient texts that were once accessible only through long hours of human study. Machine learning and neural networks do not make definitive claims on their own, but they help experts ask better questions and test old theories in new ways. Already, AI has helped identify possible authorship patterns, clarified linguistic relationships, and brought fresh insight to ancient manuscripts. As this research continues, it will likely change how people study the Bible, not by replacing traditional scholarship, but by expanding it in exciting new directions. Secret patterns in Scripture. Ever since scientists began using computers to study ancient writings, they hoped those machines would help uncover things that human scholars might miss. But when researchers applied modern artificial intelligence to the Bible and other ancient texts, the results were not just helpful, they were surprising. In several studies, AI didn't simply repeat what experts had long believed. Instead, the machines revealed patterns, timelines, and connections that could reshape how we understand the world's oldest religious texts. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from research that used AI to look deep into the language patterns of the Bible. A group of scientists and scholars from universities across the world worked together to teach a computer how to spot differences in how words are used across different books of the Bible. They fed the machine thousands of examples of simple, common words, words like king, and, or thus, and asked it to group texts by writing style. The AI then compared chapters that had already been labeled by human experts, and the results matched expert classifications with surprising accuracy. But the most startling part was how the AI explained its decisions. Instead of just giving an answer, the model could point to the specific words and patterns that made one passage look like it was written in one style rather than another. This meant the researchers could see the basis for the AI's choices, bringing clarity to questions about who likely wrote certain parts of the Bible. This study did more than confirm known scholarship. It challenged it in some areas. It once found that two closely related parts of the Bible's narrative, the ark stories in the books of Samuel, did not match the same writing group when analyzed by the AI. While humans often group those passages together because they tell the same story, the machine saw patterns in word choice and structure that suggested different traditions or hands were behind the writing. These findings support long-standing debates in biblical scholarship, but now there's hard statistical evidence pointing in the same direction. Another stunning development came from AI's use in dating ancient manuscripts known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. some of the oldest known copies of portions of the Hebrew Bible, and they have helped scholars understand the history of early Judaism and Christianity. Traditionally, researchers used radiocarbon dating and handwriting comparison by human experts to estimate when these scrolls were written. But recently, scientists developed an AI model named Enoch to look at tiny details in the ink trace and handwriting shape that human eyes often miss. The results were astonishing. When Enoch was trained on a set of scroll fragments with known radiocarbon dates, it learned how handwriting subtly changed over time. Then, when presented with fragments that had not been dated before, the AI predicted ages that matched expert estimates about 79% of the time. In many cases, the AI's predictions were even more precise than traditional radiocarbon ranges, giving a narrower span of possible years. In some cases, Enoch suggested that pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls could be significantly older than previously thought. One fragment containing part of the Book of Daniel, for example, might date back to around the same time the book was originally written, possibly as early as the 3rd century BCE, instead of only being a later copy. Another fragment of Ecclesiastes was suggested to be from around the 3rd century BCE as well, instead of the mid-2nd century BCE. If these datings hold up under further review, they would represent the earliest surviving copies of certain biblical texts. These breakthroughs matter because they change how scholars think about the timeline of scripture transmission. Human scholars had long assumed certain writing styles and scripts appeared at specific historical periods, but the AI's findings suggest that styles we thought belonged to one century might have started earlier and lasted longer than expected. This reshapes the historical context of the scriptures and the communities that produced them, providing a richer picture of ancient intellectual life. Another surprising insight came from the world of literary structure analysis. While not as widely covered in popular media, academic papers have shown that machine learning can help detect complex literary features like chiasmus, a poetic structure where ideas mirror around a central point across large bodies of ancient text. Traditional detection of these patterns required scholars to read and reread passages by hand, but AI can scan hundreds of segments at once, flagging potential matches for closer human inspection. Taken together, these findings show that AI isn't just speeding up old tasks, it's revealing things we didn't know we could find. Now, researchers from fields as diverse as mathematics, archaeology, linguistics, and theology are using these tools side by side, creating new bridges between science and the humanities. Despite the breakthroughs, the work is still early. Some scholars caution that AI tools should be used carefully and in collaboration with traditional methods. The disturbing outputs on biblical texts. When scientists and scholars began using artificial intelligence to analyze biblical texts, many were excited about the possibilities, but alongside the excitement came a growing concern. Some of the outputs from AI analysis were so strange, inaccurate, or misleading that people described them as disturbing. These concerns aren't just about technical errors. They strike at the very heart of how humans understand sacred texts, interpret spiritual meaning, and maintain cultural and religious integrity. First, one of the biggest problems is misinterpretation. AI language models do not truly understand what they are reading the way humans do. They do not have insight into history, culture, or theology. Instead, they work by analyzing statistical patterns in data, predicting what word should come next in a sentence based on what they have seen in their training material. This means that when an AI tries to interpret biblical verses, it can easily miss the deeper symbolic meaning or the cultural context that a human scholar would know. Things like metaphors, allegories, or historical references that are key to understanding Scripture may be simplified or translated incorrectly by the AI because it lacks that human contextual awareness. This risk is not theoretical, it shows up in real use cases. Scholars have noted that AI tools can produce interpretations that lack theological depth or miss the meaning of symbolic language entirely. When a sacred text uses poetic or symbolic language, the AI can reduce it to a literal meaning that is not what the text intended. In religious studies, these subtleties matter a great deal. Missing them can lead people to conclusions that seem coherent on the surface but are fundamentally flawed or misleading. Another disturbing outcome comes from the phenomenon called AI hallucination. This is when the AI generates information that sounds plausible but is actually false or made up. Because language models don't verify facts the way a scholar does, they sometimes fabricate details, including bogus citations, events that never occurred, or quotations that do not exist in the original texts. In biblical research, hallucinations are especially dangerous because they can give the impression of scholarly evidence where none exists, leading people to believe something about Scripture that is simply untrue. There is also a deeper concern related to theological distortion. AI models are trained on enormous data sets that combine sacred texts, secular commentary, academic writing, and general internet content. When an AI system generates output about religious topics, it may blend ideas from different traditions in ways that are theologically inconsistent. This can cause confusion, especially among people who lack deep theological training. It may appear as though the AI is offering profound spiritual insight, when in fact it is presenting a hybrid of unrelated ideas. These kinds of outputs can be seen as disturbing not only because they are inaccurate, but also because they can be emotionally persuasive. AI text can sound confident and authoritative even when it is wrong. For a reader who is not careful, this confident tone can make false or misleading interpretations seem truthful. This creates a dangerous situation where the AI's voice, which is not grounded in spiritual understanding or interpretive expertise, can inadvertently shape a person's beliefs or understanding of Scripture. Another aspect that adds to the concern is the loss of human meaning and reasoning. Sacred texts are deeply tied to the experience of faith communities, cultural traditions, historical context, and spiritual interpretation. The Bible is not simply a book of data points. It is a living text with layers of interpretation that have been developed over centuries. AI, however, treats the text like data. Without human insight, it can strip away what makes these texts meaningful to millions of people. The result can feel hollow or even disrespectful to readers who see the Bible as sacred. For many religious communities, there is also a fear of substitution. The idea that AI could replace the role of teachers, pastors, or scholars in interpreting Scripture. Some fear that if people rely too much on AI for spiritual insight, they may stop engaging deeply with the text themselves or turn to technology instead of tradition, prayer, or community guidance. This worry goes beyond technical accuracy. It touches on identity, authority, and the way religious knowledge is passed down through generations. Part of the concern also relates to bias in AI output. AI models can reflect the biases present in their training data. If most of the data come from certain cultural or theological perspectives, the output may unintentionally reinforce those perspectives while ignoring others. This can lead to skewed interpretations that favor one tradition over another, or that fail to represent minority viewpoints within a religious community. Such bias can shape how people think about Scripture in ways that hadn't been intended. In addition to interpretive issues, there are ethical concerns about the spiritual implications of letting AI speak authoritatively about sacred matters. A machine does not have lived experience, faith commitment, or spiritual sensitivity, all of which are important when approaching texts that are central to people's deepest beliefs and values. Therefore, when an AI output blurs theological boundaries or generates content that sounds spiritual but is not grounded in Scripture, it can feel spiritually triggering to those who take the text seriously. The dark side of AI in religion. When scientists began using artificial intelligence to study the Bible, many were excited about its potential. Yet almost immediately, important ethical and scholarly questions arose. These concerns go beyond technical accuracy. They touch on moral responsibility, authority, bias, privacy, and the very purpose of religious and academic study. These are not small issues. They challenge how technology should be used when it interacts with sacred texts, faithful communities, and academic institutions. Answers are still emerging, but the concerns are real and backed by research and expert analysis. One major concern is authority and decision-making. In religious contexts, interpretation of Scripture often carries deep meaning and influence. AI systems, however, make decisions based on patterns in data, not on spiritual insight or moral wisdom. When AI is used to generate interpretations, summaries, or even doctrinal insights, Scholars worry that people may start viewing machine output as authoritative, even though AI lacks theological training and spiritual awareness. Scholars emphasize that human agency still matters most when interpreting sacred writings. This concern also appears in religious education, where AI tools are being tested to assist with teaching and learning. While AI can help tailor learning plans and manage administrative tasks, it cannot replace the deep relational and spiritual formation that occurs through human teachers, mentors, and pastoral leaders. Research on AI and religious education highlights that relying too much on technology can reduce learning to measurable outcomes, instead of nurturing character, moral understanding, and spiritual growth. Another ethical challenge surrounds bias and representation in AI systems. AI models are trained on datasets, and those datasets often reflect the biases of the people who created them. Because of this, scholars argue that inclusivity and representation must be part of the ethical framework for AI in biblical studies. Institutions that use AI tools should involve theologians from different traditions, cultural backgrounds, and perspectives when designing and testing these systems. This helps ensure that AI does not simply echo one dominant viewpoint, but supports a broader, more diverse understanding of sacred texts. Data privacy is another serious concern. When AI is used in educational or research settings, it often requires access to large amounts of information, including personal data from students, researchers, and readers. If such data is stored, processed, or shared without full consent and strong protections, it can be misused or exposed in ways that harm individuals. Scholars point out that this is especially sensitive in contexts involving spiritual life, because personal faith questions are deeply private and should not be treated like ordinary data. Connected to privacy is the ethical issue of transparency. When AI generates research output, users often do not see the underlying data, training sources, or assumptions that shape that output. This lack of transparency can make it difficult for scholars and religious leaders to evaluate whether the AI's reasoning is sound, doctrinally appropriate, or academically rigorous. Without clear insight into how AI reaches its conclusions, people may mistakenly trust machine interpretation as objective truth when it is based on hidden biases and assumptions. Another area of ethical concern is accuracy and scholarly integrity. Academic communities place a high value on peer review, evidence, and proper citation. Yet some AI systems are known to produce statements that are not supported by reliable source material. When AI tools create summaries or scholarly content without proper backing, they can undermine academic integrity and spread misinformation. This risk has been recognized not only in biblical research but in academic publishing more broadly, where AI-generated citations and content have occasionally slipped into published works without verification. These risks are not abstract. Faith communities have debated the proper role of AI in religious life and scholarship because the technology does not possess spiritual wisdom or moral conscience. Some theologians and ethicists argue that AI may inadvertently promote a transactional view of faith, one where spiritual growth is reduced to algorithmic outcomes instead of lived experience, community, and spiritual discipline. Critics caution against practices that elevate AI insight above human pastoral care and theological reflection. When AI tools generate prayer content, devotional material, or spiritual insights that mimic sacred language, there is a danger that such content may be mistaken for genuine spiritual guidance. Scholars and theologians point out that AI does not have divine inspiration or moral discernment, so presenting its output as spiritually authoritative can mislead believers. This issue touches on fundamental questions about authenticity and the role of technology in mediating religious experience. Ethical concerns also extend to how AI may affect the formation of future scholars and leaders. If students and emerging researchers rely heavily on AI for interpretation and analysis, they may not develop the critical thinking, hermeneutical skills, and deep theological grounding that are essential to serious biblical scholarship. Some educators worry about a future where AI tools do much of the thinking, leaving learners with shallow understanding and limited capacity to engage complex theological questions on their own. From a broader ethical perspective, Some religious leaders and institutions stress the importance of human dignity and moral responsibility in the use of AI. Christian ethics, for instance, emphasizes that humans are made in the image of God and possess intrinsic value that should not be overridden by technological systems. This view calls for ethical frameworks that protect human agency, creativity, and spiritual freedom, values that may be compromised if AI systems dominate interpretation or decision-making in religious contexts. These scholarly concerns reflect a deeper truth. AI is not neutral. It carries with it the values, assumptions, and limitations of its designers and trainers. Without careful ethical oversight, AI can inadvertently distort or diminish the richness of religious tradition and human scholarship. That's why many experts call for interdisciplinary collaboration to create ethical guidelines that ensure AI supports, rather than weakens, religious and academic integrity. Finally, ongoing debate about AI's ethical use in religion is part of a larger global conversation about how technology should align with human values. Religious institutions such as the Vatican have expressed broad concerns about AI's potential to amplify misinformation and erode human dignity unless its development is guided by moral evaluation. This highlights that ethical considerations in AI are not limited to one field. They touch on basic questions about truth, authority, community, and what it means to be human in an era of powerful machines. AI versus religion, a growing debate. For many people around the world, religion is not just a set of texts or ideas, it's a reality, a community practice, and a source of identity and meaning. In the last decade, artificial intelligence has become powerful enough to interact with religious texts, answer questions about faith, and even participate in religious experiences. This has sparked a broader debate that goes beyond academic study into the heart of faith, community, and spiritual belief. While there is real promise in AI's role, others warn of serious risks. At the center of the debate is a core question. What does it mean for an AI, a machine, to engage with something sacred? AI tools are already being used in religious settings, from analyzing sacred texts to powering chatbots that answer spiritual questions. AI can help people learn about religion, compare traditions, and explore scripture in ways that were once time-consuming or inaccessible. But this same technology can also produce inaccurate, shallow, or biased results when it tries to interpret religious meaning. One aspect of the debate focuses on the educational value of AI in religious studies. On the positive side, AI can make religious education more accessible. Students can explore religious texts with immediate feedback, and digital platforms can offer insights into translations or historical background. AI's natural language processing makes it possible to compare doctrinal writings quickly or support learners in remote areas. Yet, research shows there are also deep risks associated with bias in AI-generated religious content. Another area of debate is how AI reshapes religious cognition and learning. A recent study explored how AI influences religious understanding and found that while AI can clarify ambiguous passages and support respectful dialogue, it can also amplify human biases. These cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias or selective interpretation, are inherited from both the user and the AI's training data. This means an AI could strengthen pre-existing beliefs without encouraging critical reflection, leading to deeper divides between groups rather than building understanding. Some religious thinkers raise spiritual and theological questions. AI does not have personal faith, moral discernment, or spiritual experience, qualities that are central to many religious traditions. When AI attempts to interpret scriptural passages or provide spiritual guidance, critics argue it lacks the inner moral context that informs genuine religious insight. This could lead believers away from authentic doctrine into confusion, dependence on machine interpretation, or religious materialism, treating spiritual experience as just another information task rather than a lived reality. Even within religious communities, views vary widely. Some congregations are experimenting with AI to make services more accessible or engaging. Churches in the United States are using AI to generate sermons, answer questions about Scripture, or create interactive experiences. Proponents see this as a way to connect with people in a digital age, especially younger generations. Others, including clerical leaders, caution that AI lacks relational and spiritual capability. They argue that such tools should support religious practice, not replace human leadership. A related concern highlights the risk of AI weakening traditional forms of community and authority. Religious practice often involves interpretation, debate, and personal mentorship, processes that build community and spiritual depth. If AI becomes a go-to source for answers about faith, there is a danger that people might bypass these human exchanges. This could result in a more isolated relationship with religion, where individuals turn to an algorithm rather than engaging with teachers, scripture, or their own community. Privacy and data ethics also form part of the debate. As AI tools interact with individuals in religious contexts, through apps, prayer bots, or digital counseling, they may collect sensitive personal data about beliefs, crises of faith, or intimate questions. Scholars warn that without robust protection and informed consent, this data could be misused, commercialized, or shared in ways that violate privacy norms sacred to believers. This is particularly important because questions of faith and spiritual struggle are deeply personal. Some academics see a philosophical or cultural shift underway. Theologians point out that AI's interaction with religion raises questions about human purpose and the nature of sacred knowledge. In one analysis, researchers argued that the integration of AI into religion isn't simply a matter of tool usage. It challenges traditional notions of authority, revelation, and spiritual authenticity. AI may shape not just how people access religious texts, but how they interpret them, potentially introducing new narratives or metaphors that alter religious imagination itself. Yet, supporters of AI in religion argue that technology should be viewed neither as inherently harmful nor inherently sacred, but as something that must be integrated responsibly. They advocate for ethical guidelines, transparency in AI design, and context-sensitive use of technology in religious education and practice. By bringing diverse voices into the discussion, these proponents believe AI can enrich religious engagement without undermining core beliefs. In the end, whether AI becomes a partner, a threat, or simply a tool in religious life depends on how communities choose to shape its use. With careful thought, ethical grounding, and human responsibility, AI can support religious study and practice. But without discernment, there is a risk that technology might distort sacred meaning or replace the deeply human aspects of faith it cannot replicate. What are your thoughts on the use of AI in studying the Bible? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.